Hi, Chris here, and today I'm going to be talking about Abloy Profile, or more specifically, tooling for Abloy Profiles. Because these are, beautiful, cool, interesting locks that don't get picked perhaps as much as they ought to, and I think that's mainly because the tooling's a bit of a challenge. So I'm going to show you my profile tools and talk you through the design rationale for these, so you will be able to make tools to attack whichever profile you find yourself with. Now, before we get into the tools, it's necessary to understand the locks. So let's have a closer look at the Cutaway there. Okay, so here we have Cutaway of a profile, and you can see here there's got some, you've got the load of code discs, but then you've got some extra discs in here which do interesting things. So there's a profile plate at the back, just there. This one has a profile plate in the middle. That's quite common at least here in the UK, but not all Abloy profiles have that. And then there's also a profile plate at the front. So you can see this one, it's got a big tooth on the right hand side of the keyway there, and a bit of a shelf. Now all three of those profile plates do different things. They're all different shapes. So the one at the back, and this is the most common format, the one at the back has a tooth on the outside, looks like this, and the one in the middle just has a sort of shelf on it, and then of course that one at the front has a tooth at the bottom, and those correspond to features on the key. So that cutout in the key goes with the tooth on the front. You've got the shelf that extends quite wide and limits how much key you can have either side, and then the tooth on the rear plate on the key corresponds to that. Now there's multiple versions of all of these profile plates, and that is a key feature of Abloy Profile as a whole, in that it isn't really one lock, it is a whole load of different cores. And that's one of the big difficulties with it, is that the tools that you need for the different variations are not the same. So this one is most sort of common general style in the UK. You can see it's got that sort of knob on the right hand side. Got another one here that also has a knob on the right hand side, but it's actually not in the same place. So the key from the Cutaway won't go in there. If I try this key in the Cutaway, that won't go in there either. So you've got multiple different styles there, and that's just the front plate. Now, if I look at this lock, you can see that has also got some warding on the right hand side of the keyway there. Won't go with that key. That one will go into it, but it won't go all the way to the back, and that is because the rear profile plate is different. You can see you've got a little cutout really quite close to the edge on that one, whereas this one you've got the same key profile, but the cutout is almost in the middle. So from the locks I have for the right hand warding on the front plate, I've got at least 3 positions of that warding on the rear profile plate, which basically cover these extremes. This is as far round as it goes one way, and that's as high as it goes the other way. So lots of variety there. And then there are also locks like this one, where you can see now the warding is on the left hand side of the keyway, and the tooth on the rear plate is on the right. And then finally you have variations on this theme. I sometimes call this sort of rainbow keyway, where you've got a rounded knob in the middle, and this one has got the same key as this lock. That one doesn't have any warding on the rear plate at all, but you just need to get over this lump on the front to be able to get the key in. So quite a bit of variety there in the keyway, and of course all of these, if you were making a perfect tool for each lock, all of these would have different tools, and that's a huge amount of variation. You know, lots and lots of different keyways, lots of different versions you could have there. You've got all different combinations of left and right hand and centrally warded, and lots of different positions of the tooth in the rear profile plate. So that's a bit of an obstacle in terms of making tools that will work with all of these. So how do we go about addressing that? Okay, if we start with the most common design for here in the UK, that is variations on this, the right hand warded version. Unfortunately, this one is actually the easiest to make tools for, because that warding doesn't get in the way too much in terms of making a tensioner. If I just show you the space you've got to work in, that, give or take, is the space you've got to work in to fit a tensioner arm in there. So you can see that sort of knobble isn't really making any difference, and you've just got that shelf to get over, and that makes the tooling really quite similar to tooling for an Abloy Classic. It is a little bit bigger. The diameter of this key is about 7.5 millimeters, something like that. So you can't just use a Classic tool. But yeah, in terms of concept and design, broadly quite similar. So for a lock like this would be my first choice. What we have here is a 4mm ejector pin and the sleeve that came with it, which started off as an 8mm sleeve, and then I've just taken that down a little bit so as it'll fit inside a 7.5mm diameter half circle. Now the end might look a little bit strange. You can see there, taking a big chunk out of there, and that is so that it will fit through all of the different teeth on the rear profile plate, and also all variations of that front profile plate, the tooth on the front profile plate. So that'll quite happily go into this lock, and it'll also quite happily go into this lock and make it all the way to the back of that lock as well, despite the sort of relatively central tooth, which sort of just ends up sitting like there. Something that you may have noticed, there's in this lock there's 2 of the final discs are actually max rotation, and that is actually quite common. You can see there, that's the chunk of key, and similarly that one, same, this one, same. So you, for most locks, you could actually do a tensioner that would do 2 discs. Now this one, however, I've cut it a bit shorter. It only does the very last one. You see, just the last disc move in there. But there are things you can do to do 2, and that brings me on to this. So this design here, this is made from a 6mm tube, and the pick here started out as a 10mm spring steel roll pin, which I've ground down quite a lot to get it into a 7mm keyway. So this is only, this is less than a millimetre thick now, top to bottom. That took quite a lot of work, and is maybe not the best in the end, but it a little bit bendy, but it does work. Now this design here, you can see I've got a decent amount of length on the end, matches the double disc, but I've just got these prongs on the end rather than a full arc, and the idea there is that will fit over any variation of the rear profile plate, be it left or right, and similarly this will go over any variation of the front plate, left or right. So if I pop that in here, you can see there it's turned the last two discs, but that will also work on a lot like this with right-hand warding, sorry, left-hand warding, and a right-hand tooth plate there. That will go all the way to the back of there, no trouble. And of course, locks like this, same front plate warding, but it's got that central tooth at the back, so it will go all the way into there. So there's some of those sort of fairly subtle things on here. I don't know if you can see it on film, but there's like a little step. There's a little step there, so I've taken a bit of thickness off there to make that go over the sort of shelf, and also removed a little bit of material from there and there, so as it will go over some of the more extreme, like basically that corner there, go over the more extreme variants of the front plate, and still make it all the way to the back, and it won't foul on the shelf. So this won't do every lock, but it will do both left-hand, right-hand warded versions of the most common profiles. Now, of course, to be awkward, not every lock has that double disc at the back. If I look at this key, for example, compare it to this one, you can see that there's a lot less uncut length at the back, and that's because there's only one max rotation disc at the back of this lock, and the same on this amazing 656. This has got different thickness discs as well, but yeah, there's only one max rotation at the back of there. So that sort of pronged design, although it will do a lot of locks, will not do everything. So might choose to do something a little bit different. Now, this design here, again, this is made from a 6mm sleeve for a 4mm pin. This design here will do both of these locks, even though they've got quite different warding. So this one has a sort of spike in the middle, but it's quite central. And it does also have a rear profile plate, but this goes in there quite nicely. And then I've just cut that notch in the end to go through the profile plate. This one doesn't have a rear profile plate, or well, it does, but it's the same as the front profile plate, so it doesn't have a sort of toothed plate. But you can see that will go over there, and that will go all the way to the back. So the notch isn't really doing anything there, but it's just making it over those profile plates, so you can get in and tension the lock. So that's a useful design. And then finally, I've also got this. So this is designed like I could use the sort of pronged tensioner on this lock with the left-hand warding, but only if it's got the double plate at the back. So I've made this, which does a single disc tension at the back of a left-hand warded profile. So you can see that will go in there, and that will go all the way to the back of there, no problem. And this is made, again, this is made from a sleeve, 6mm sleeve, but of course to cut that notch in it, if I cut that notch in it without putting something in the middle, I just cut the end off. So what I've done there is I've cut the end off the pin, 4mm pin, and I've silver soldered it into the end of this tube, and then I can cut that notch in, which goes all the way through the thickness of the original tube, but without the end of the tube breaking off. So I think you can probably just about see a little bit of solder in there. And just a tiny little bit of the focus. Hopefully you can see the solder line and a tiny bit of the plug left. You've got this little bit of the tube. That's a bit of the plug, and that's the rest of the tube. You can see the solder line between the two. So that will work in locks like this. So how many tensioners have I got there? I think I've got 4 tensioners. One for right hand warding, one for left hand warding, this one for the sort of central warding and the rounded knobble. And between those 3, I think those would do near enough any Abloy profile. And then there's this one, which you could say it's a little bit unnecessary, but if you were making just one tensioner and you wanted to be able to pick quite a few different Abloy profiles, this will certainly do most of the ones, at least here in the UK, left or right hand warded, as long as it's got that double thickness thing at the back. So yeah, go on. That's my range of profile tools, what they're for and why they are like that. Okay, raw materials wise then. So this one, 4mm pin in what was an 8mm sleeve. Started out looking like this. So very simple, you just grind that down to the shape you need, grind this down a bit, take a little bit off the diameter, and that is good to go. Of course, if you need to get over this sort of knobble in the middle or the warding on the other side, then you're going to need something like this. So this is actually a 4mm pin in a 6mm sleeve. And these are great actually, because you can use these for making Abloy Classic tips as well. But for so when you're making a classic, you use this bit as your tensioner, and then you make the picking tip out of a bit of the tube here. But for profile, you use this bit as the tensioner, and then this is a 10mm spring steel roll pin, which has a 6mm bore. You can see there that matches that quite nicely. And then you have to grind quite a lot of material off that, because actually it's 2mm thick on there. You have to grind quite a lot of material off it to get it down to the 7.5mm and end up looking like that. So that's the raw materials. All of this lot came from AliExpress, and I think the roll pin I got off eBay, but there's loads of different places you can buy spring steel roll pins. I won't show you exactly how I went about making these. Recently, another picker called Lockchuck did some great videos on that. I'll leave a link in the description. You can see how these are made. Okay, and last but not least, I thought it'd be fun to see one of these tools in action. So we've got the Cutaway. So this has got the warding over on the right hand side of the keyway. Pop that in the vise. Going to be using a prong tensioner and the roll pin picking tip. I've already rotated all the discs clockwise, so you can see the anti-rotation stops are all up against the stop there. It's a little bit awkward doing that in the vise, so I'll just do that outside of there. I find it a little bit harder to navigate holding it like this, so you can see, but we'll give it a go and we'll see if we can get this picked. Okay, I think that's at the back. So first things first, I'm actually going to compress. There's a spring on the back of the core. I'll compress that, take the load off the disc pack, and then just go through, start looking for gates. So that's those in a gate. That profile plate, you can see it's loose there because it's in its true gate. It doesn't have any other gates on it, so if you turn it out of that gate and you can't feel any other gates and you feel it drag, it's almost certainly the profile plate. Just turn it all the way clockwise and leave it. Okay, that's now in a gate. That's loose, loose. I think that's starting in a gate. What's that? In a gate now. Just work our way back through. Okay, that one's stiff now. Now it's in a gate. And that one in there. I don't know if you saw there's a bit of movement on the core there. Everything is in a gate. I'm just going to go back to the back. You can feel that last disc's rubbing. So moved it on a gate, still rubbing. Now there's only 3 gates in each disc, so if it's still rubbing, it must be the other one's the true gate. Same on the next disc, that's rubbing. Still rubbing. There we go, that one's set now. Profile plate still set. That's nice and loose. That one's rubbing. Yeah, that's loose now. Yeah, that one, I think that's 3, I think that's 3, that's rubbing. Still rubbing hard. And there we go. Lock is open. Okay, so if I lock that back up, try and retrieve my pick. And then let's have a go on this little one. So you can see this has got the watering over on the left hand side of the keyway. I'm going to be going in with the same pick. Don't be fooled by tiny size. This is still quite a tricky pick actually. And there we go at last, open. So hopefully then that is a good demo of some tools and techniques you can use to get into Profile. It is a practical home build. It's not as intimidating as it might seem. If you buy the right materials and you know what you're doing and you know your lock, it is absolutely possible. So let's hope for more people picking these sometime soon.